Hi, how are you today? I'm going to read you a book. How does that sound? Does story time sound good to you? So here's what I'm going to share with you today. This is an old book, like one that I read way back, like when I was a little girl. And the name of it is Cowboy Eddie. See? There's the cowboy, and there's his horse. So this might be a really good book. What do you think? I'm excited to read it to you. Okay, so here we go. The story is written by, I'm going to put my glasses on so I can read better, okay? There, now I got my glasses on, right? Yay. All right, so this story, the name of it again is Cowboy Eddie, and it's written by Joyce Glasscock and illustrated by Dorothy Grider. And illustrated means that that's the lady who drew the pictures. So Dorothy Grider drew the pictures and colored them. Isn't that nice? So what I'm going to do, since I have to look at the book to be able to read it, is I'm going to show you the pictures first so you can see the pretty pictures of what I'm about to read. Oh, little boy looking over the fence. And look, I see some horses out there in the pasture behind that barn. Okay, I guess maybe that's the house. Anyway, there's a nice meadow there. Let's see. Let's get started, shall we? Here we go. This was Eddie's first day on the Lazy E Ranch. Eddie's daddy, or Big Ed, as everyone called him, had bought the ranch, and Eddie had never been on one before. They called it the Lazy E Ranch because both of their names started with E. When it came time to mark or brand their cattle or horses, their brand would be the E with a line under it, and every animal would be stamped with it. Eddie was 5 years old and the happiest boy in the world because he could now learn to be a cowboy. I'm going to show you. You see that little symbol right there? That was their brand. That's what they stamped on to every single one of their cattle or their horses. They had that brand. It's kind of like a tattoo, but it's burned into their hide. I don't like that too well, but tattoos are better, I suppose. Okay, here's the next page. We're going to turn the page. See there? That's the one we're going to read next. It says the house was an old one, and Eddie helped Big Ed when the repairing began. When Daddy needed nails in repairing the porch, along came Eddie with his little bucket of nails to fill up Big Ed's nail sack. See, there he is doing that, right? When the house was being painted, Eddie had a little brush and he painted all the little cracks so that they wouldn't show. When the house was finished, Big Ed started building a big barn and some corral fences. Corral. I thought it said coral. It says corral. He started building some corral fences to hold the cattle, and I'm going to turn the page. Started building some corral fences to hold the cattle and the horses while they were up at the ranch. Big Ed had Bill and Jim, they were the hired hands, helping him, but Eddie also helped by bringing the tools needed to the men. He also carried water for them, and they were glad to see Eddie when he came along with his little wagon, for in it were a jug of ice water and a box with glasses. Finally, the ranch was spick and span with a coat of white paint over everything to make it as pretty as a picture. See, there he is coming with the wagon. Now we've got to read this page. Eddie was impatient, though. Every day he asked Big Ed, "Daddy, when do we start ranching?" Big Ed would laugh and say, "Son, we must first get everything in running order so that when we get our cattle and horses and plant our feed, we will have some place to put them. Right now, I am going over to Mr. Tanner's and look at some cattle and horses he has to sell. Would you like to come along?" "Oh, yes," said Eddie. "Can we bring them home and ride them?" The horses, I mean? There he is, talking to Big Ed. Big Ed is his daddy, I think, isn't he? Here's the next page. See the truck? It's going down the road. Well, we will see about getting them home, but I don't know about riding them until I find you a gentle horse, said Big Ed. So Big Ed and Eddie got into their truck and drove over to Mr. Tanner's ranch. Big Ed bought 50 head of cattle, 10 horses, and a mare, or a mother horse, with a colt. There was another gentle mare named Maudie in the bunch. See there? There's the pictures. Can you see them? That's the ranch they were driving to, where they bought all that cattle and the horse. And Big Ed told Eddie he could learn to ride on her. Oh, how exciting. Mr. Tanner said he would deliver the animals the next day. Look at that. The next morning, Eddie sat on the fence and watched for Mr. Tanner and his boys with the herd of cattle, as Big Ed called them. Soon he saw a cloud of dust and heard the cowboys hollering at the cattle. The last thing in the gate was the mare and her pinto colt. The colt was brown and white spotted with a white diamond in the middle of his forehead. Eddie decided right then to call him Spot. See there? Turn the page. I wish you were here with me. You could turn the pages for me. When the cattle and horses were in the corral, Mr. Tanner and his boys stayed for lunch. Eddie sat and watched them as they came in the door, clanking their spurs and hung up their big hats. He wished with all his heart he could be just like them when he grew up. I'll show you the picture real quick here. See there? They're getting ready to eat, aren't they? The next day, when Eddie came down to breakfast, Big Ed had on a big hat, boots, and leather overalls, or chaps, open at the back. He and the 2 hired men were going to move the cattle to the pasture down by the river so they would have plenty of water. Turn the page, since you're not here to do it for me. Here we go, we'll read about this. Eddie said, "My goodness, Daddy, are you a cowboy too? You can do just about everything, can't you?" Big Ed laughed, and he said, "Well, just about everything, Eddie. You see, when you live on a ranch, you have to learn to do everything from being a carpenter to doctoring sick animals." "Daddy, when can I learn to be a cowboy? I want to ride a horse too. I want a horse to ride," begged Eddie. "Just as soon as we get the cattle to the pasture, I will saddle Maudie," said Big Ed, "and you can start learning to ride. When the new colt is ready to ride, I will see that you have the best cowboy suit I can buy." "Oh boy, a cowboy suit," cried Eddie. "I will try so hard and make you so proud of me. Just wait and see." "Do you want to come out now and watch us rope and saddle our horses?" asked Big Ed. "Oh yes," said Eddie. Away he ran to climb up on the fence and watch. Look, there he is. He's climbing up on the fence, isn't he? Let's turn that page again. Did I get them all? I guess I did. Oh, look. Look at there. Read about that. The pony that Big Ed picked out was a tan buckskin with a black mane and tail. Whirr went the rope, and over his head, and Big Ed tightened up on it, while Bill and Jim put a saddle on him. Big Ed climbed into the saddle, and whoops, up in the air went the pony. His head went down, and his feet went up. Look at that, he's bucking, isn't he? Oh, my goodness. Then they both went down, and again, he jumped as high as he could go in the air. No matter how high the pony jumped, Big Ed was still in the saddle when he came down. Eddie's eyes nearly popped as he watched Big Ed ride the pony to a standstill. Big Ed rode over to the fence, and Eddie said, "Oh, Daddy, that was great. Do you think I will ever be able to ride like that?" "Sure you will, son. It just takes a few years of practice, said Big Ed. This little pony isn't mean. He was just feeling good this morning. Bill and Jim picked out a couple of horses, and it wasn't long before they had them quiet and ready to start out with the cattle. Eddie watched them out of sight, then went over to the other corral where the mare and her colt were. Eddie called to the little colt. Here's that picture again of that bucking bronco. See him? Pretty cool, huh? Wow. That lady was a good drawer, wasn't she? She's a good artist. Here's the next page that we're on. He's going to go over and look at that little colt. See there? Come here, Spot. Come here and let me pet you. But Spot just nuzzled up closer to his mother. Oh, I know, said Eddie. I guess you want some sugar. Daddy told me once that horses like sugar. Away he ran to the house to beg a lump of sugar from his mother. He came running back and called pleadingly to Spot again. Come here, Spot. See, I have some sugar for you. Spot cocked his head to one side, as if to say, who are you anyway? Eddie stayed by the fence all morning talking to Spot, and finally, around noon, Spot took the few steps over to Eddie. Stopping with every step to see what Eddie would do, he reached out to Eddie's hand and he licked at the sugar. It tasted so good, and in no time at all the sugar was gone. Eddie reached out to pet Spot, but Spot jumped back and went back over to his mother. Let's turn that page again. The very next day, Big Ed came in and said, Eddie, do you feel like learning how to ride today? I have Maud saddled up, and I think she is gentle enough for you to ride. I should say I do, said Eddie. The quicker I learn to ride, the quicker I get my cowboy suit. They both went outside, and Big Ed lifted Eddie up onto Maudie, saying, up you go. See there? Up he goes, up he goes. He took up the stirrups to fit Eddie's legs, then took the reins and let Maudie run around so Eddie could get the feel of the saddle. Then Eddie said, oh, Daddy, that's baby stuff. Let me have the reins myself. All right, let's see if you can do as I tell you. Hold the reins in both hands, and when you want to turn right, pull hard to the right rein, and when you want to turn left, pull hard on the left rein. Do you think you can remember? Asked Big Ed. See, there he is. It's all saddled up, isn't he? I think so, said Eddie. Off he started down the lane, turned and came back, then rode up and down a few times. Maudie was gentle as could be. There he is riding, see? After that, Eddie rode every day. First, he just walked Maudie, then he trotted her, and finally, he made her break into a gentle lope. He learned to ride well, but all he could do was think of the time he could ride Spot and wear his cowboy suit. Every day, he took a lump of sugar to Spot, until Spot would whinny and come running to the fence whenever he saw Eddie. Finally came the day when Big Ed said, Eddie, I think it's time we started breaking Spot into a saddle. Look at that. Look at, see there? When Eddie came up to the corral fence, Spot came trotting over, expecting to get, turn the page to find out, a lump of sugar. This time, though, a rope was put over his head and a saddle on his back. He didn't like it at first, but Big Ed led him around until he got used to it. Then Eddie climbed on his back. Spot stood still a minute and then shook a little. Eddie reached out, patted his neck, and said, there, Spot, it's just me on your back. I'm not going to hurt you. See, there he is on his back. And his daddy's over here watching, making sure nothing bad happens, right? And he doesn't get hurt. Spot turned his head around and smelled of Eddie's knee as if to make sure that it was really Eddie. Then, as Eddie touched him with his heels, he started off. Eddie rode down the lane and back, then over to Big Ed. Here's our next page. Well, Daddy, it's about time you bought me that cowboy suit you promised me, isn't it? He asked. I have been waiting until I could ride Spot as my very own pony before I asked you for it. You are right, and tomorrow when I go to town, I will buy it for you the very first thing, said Big Ed. Sure enough, the next day Big Ed went home. Big Ed brought... I gotta start that one over. I screwed that one up. Grandma Teresa's gotta start all over. Here I go. Sure enough, the next day Big Ed brought home Eddie's cowboy suit, and it was complete down to the pair of twin toy pistols to wear on each ship. Eddie tried on the chaps, the bright red shirt, big bandana, handkerchief, boots, and a big cowboy hat. There was even a pair of spurs, but of course they weren't very sharp because Eddie did not want to hurt Spot when he touched him in the side with them to make him run fast. Look, Daddy, do I look like a real cowboy now? Asked Eddie. You certainly do, son. And when we look at some cattle this afternoon at Mr. Wright's, you may ride Spot and go with us. See, there he is carrying the packages. And there's Eddie putting on his cowboy boots and his spurs. Eddie could hardly believe it. At last he was able to wear his cowboy suit, ride his beloved Spot, and actually help the cowboys bring in some cattle. There he goes. See there? Bill, Jim, Big Ed, and Eddie rode their horses over this time so they could bring the cattle back. They stayed overnight and started back the next morning with the cattle. The cowboys treated Eddie as one of them and told him he was the best looking cowboy in those parts. This is a good book, isn't it? Sounds like he's getting to be a really good cowboy. Oh my goodness, he is. Look at that. Look at that. One-handed. He's waving his hat in the air. Looks like they're doing a cattle drive. See there? Isn't that nice? Okay. Eddie rode at the back of the drive, and when the cowboys waved their big hats and hollered at the cattle to make them move on, Eddie waved his new hat and hollered with the rest of them. Yes, Eddie was indeed a real cowboy now. And that is the end. He's a real cowboy. Pretty cool. I liked that book. Did you like that book? I hope so. I really liked that book a lot. Maybe I'll read that one to you again sometime. Now, if you liked reading this book with me, just let me know. Have your mom or dad let me know in the comments below. Or if you know how to work the computer, you can let me know in the comments below too. And just tell me what you liked and what you didn't like, and maybe what kind of book you'd like to read next time. Okay? I will see you soon, and it's been a lot of fun reading to you.